player decks in the game, what's the average hand strength going to be? Because the draw is random. They're not going to have the same amount of potency in their hand every time. And then figure out then how strong does this book need to be to make for a close game with pretty much every possible combination of characters. So sorting all of that out was a nightmare. I had 10-hour marathon play tests at my house where I was feeding everybody and they were playing the games like 30 times in a row, executing this specific, okay, now you have to play this book. We're cycling this character out and putting this character in, like this series of planned experiments.
Wow. So you had a serious litmus test going on for the balance.
Yeah.
When you mentioned that you tested it at multiple player counts, my girlfriend and I play a lot of games 2-player, and usually when you're playing a co-op game 2-player, it means you're playing multi-handed. But in the Dresden-Files, you guys did something that when I first read the rule said, there's no way this can work. We'll play the first game multi-handed because there's no way this can work. But what you guys do for 2-player is each player takes 2 characters. They shuffle the character decks together, and then they draw a hand of cards from that conglomeration of cards, and then you have 2 talents and stunts that you can use. How did you come up with that idea? Because I read that and I said, "There's no way this will work," and it did.
Well, yeah, I don't like having to play a 2-player game with 2 separate hands that I have to keep separate. I find that difficult to manage. So I wanted to do something other than that, and I also wanted something that I felt like would a little better simulate having more people in terms of the amount of this kind of difficulty of organization. You know, one of the things about this game, I don't know if it's true of all cooperative games, but it's true of mine, is that in a sense, it's easier the fewer players there are. The game isn't actually easier because I've put things in to balance that out.
Mm-hmm.
But when everybody has a larger hand and draws a larger percentage of their deck, they can just do more planning because they've got more information. Each player has, in effect, more information. And there's less coordination that has to happen. So I felt like at one time I tried just creating some generic additional cards that would go into whatever deck you were playing in a 2-player game so that each player was just playing one character. But it was difficult because they still just had too much ability to coordinate. So instead I mixed the 2 decks together. I don't know exactly how I came up with it, but eventually I came up with the idea of mixing the 2 decks together and giving them just slightly less cards than 4 players would have between them to kind of balance the fact that they can do more coordination, and then played around with different restrictions and things until I came up with the current 2-player formula. Ultimately, for 1 player, I did have to make it you play with 3 sets in front of you because there was just no other real way to do it. And I just made the card supply a little tighter to compensate for the perfect knowledge. This is the first time I've ever tried to make a 1-player version for one of my games.
How did you like the solo experience?
Well, it's a little bit like, a chef trying to make a dish they don't eat because I'm not really a solo. I mean, in a sense, I'm a solo gamer because I playtest my games by myself all the time. Sure. But I find it, of limited kind of effectiveness. So what I did was I got a couple of my friends who are diehard solo game players to play first of all, I got their advice about, well, what approach should I take to creating a 1-player version? And they said, you should just try to make it, play as much like the regular game as you can. And so that led to you're playing a 3-player game by yourself where you have 3 independent characters that you play in order. And perfect knowledge is such an advantage in this game that I thought if I gave them 3 less cards than they would have in a 3-player game, that would be fair. That would make it as tight as it needed to be.
Sure.
And then I had those, 1-player fan friends play the game, tell me it was working well. Okay, we're good to go. And that was how it went.
No, that's good because solo gamers tend to lean on co-op games because by default, a co-op game means you could play it multi-handed yourself and it works fine. So we don't do any solo gaming. I'm not even going to test it that way. So I'll take your word for it. One of the things that I noticed in Fred's twittering, I suppose that's a verb, tweeting. I like twittering better. In Fred's twittering was that a large number of backers were not Board Game Geek users by a staggering percentage of where the backers were coming from. I think that speaks volumes about the license. Did you have a goal of making this game specifically non-gamer friendly?
I specifically had a goal of trying to make it work for all the constituencies I expected it to have. So I wanted it to work for serious gamers who don't even necessarily know the Dresden-Files. Maybe not grognards, but, people who are at least open to games of the weight that this is. I wanted them to like it. I wanted it to appeal to Dresden RPG players who maybe aren't big board gamers. I wanted them to be able to pick it up, and hence all the Fate kind of simulations in it, all the things that are reminiscent of Fate. And I wanted it to work well for Dresden-Files fans who weren't necessarily gamers before. So it couldn't be a super heavy game. It couldn't be, a 2-hour game with loads of Chrome. And it couldn't be a game that takes half an hour to learn. It needed to be a game with a pretty simple streamlined teach. And I can teach this game fine in like 10 minutes. Maybe 5 if you light a match under my feet or something. I could teach it.
And the rule book is very concise as well.
Yeah, we were definitely going for that. So I hope I've succeeded in all fronts. You can never perfectly balance that many constituencies. And there are people for whom it's not going to be their vision of the Dresden-Files game because they wanted a 2-hour game with a lot of Chrome in it. But, if I were getting more of them, I would be shutting out, I think, a larger audience for whom, Dresden may be more central to their lives.
Well, I won't lie to you. I would love to see a Dresden-Files adventure game a la Arkham Horror. But I think the important thing is this game delivers theme combined with mechanics that are easy enough to play. Like, I feel like I could teach this game to just about anybody, which is nice. My girlfriend's a huge Dresden-Files fan. I've read the first 2 books, so I'm a neophyte. But she was terrified, as you can imagine. When there's a license you like, you're like, oh, this better be good. Oh, this better be good. And so,
believe me, I heard that.
I'm sure.
Plenty of people.
I'm sure.
I'm still hearing it.
Well, I mean, it's a dangerous thing to a license and license board games up until, let's say, 5 or 6 years ago when Gale Force 9 started actually putting out good licensed games. It had almost been an albatross where you'd see like a licensed game, you'd be like, oh, there's no way that's any good.
Sure.
But it seems like you guys really hit the nail on the head with this one. Do you have anything that you wish you could have put in the game that maybe you hope to work into an expansion further down the road?
No, not really. There's different paths I could have taken with it, but I didn't take those paths. And, the path isn't a totally arbitrary thing. It's not like, once I sit down and I come up with a core mechanic, I can't necessarily then say, just make an arbitrary decision. Okay, well, I'm going to make this a heavy game, or I'm going to make this a light game. I mean, I could do that, but it would be a bad choice. I need to really get the feel for the core mechanic and say, what kind of game does this mechanic fit? What kind of game is this trying to be? And then try to be really internally consistent. One thing that I think makes about any game fail is if it's a strange Mutt and Jeff mix of heavy and light elements in the same game. That's not going to please anybody. So once I had the idea for the core mechanic, it was clear that this was not, the core mechanic in a 2-hour heavy game with lots of Chrome. It was the core mechanic of a simple, streamlined game. And then the challenge was getting the theme into it, which was largely a product of making the logistics puzzle that the game is, logistics effect. Because pretty much every true cooperative is a logistics puzzle at some level.
Yep.
There's really nothing else for a true cooperative to be unless it's a totally random game. finding ways to make those reflect the plot points of the storyline and the abilities and foibles of the characters.
So, do you have a favorite character in the game?
Favorite character in the game? I'm not sure my favorite character in the game is exactly the same as my favorite character in the book.
That's okay. You answer both ways. That's fine.
Sure. I mean, my favorite character in the game might be Thomas. I really like Thomas's stunt. He gets to turn over the top card of his deck, and if it's legal to play, when he turns it over, he gets to play it for free. And I like the kind of swing that adds to a game with him in it.
Nice. So you could hit a home run.
Yeah. It's really exciting when he makes his swing, and it's really frustrating when he doesn't. So I like that. I like that dynamic. I actually like playing Michael quite a bit. I've played Michael probably more than I've played any other character because he's a little trickier to use. And so often in demo games, I'm playing him and giving the other players characters that are a little simpler to get the hang of.
Sure. I'd agree with that. But when he hits, the trick is if you can get him to hit, he hits a ton, but you do have to finesse him, which is sort of interesting. And
it's counterintuitive because he hits with his overcome and take advantage cards.
Which,
right. And I think he might be my favorite character in terms of feeling like I represented the theme with the mechanics well, in his case. In particular, I like the fact that Michael and Molly's talents are the only two talents that work in that particular way where you have to prime them and then use them later. So that's a good representation of the way the theme gets represented in the mechanics, is being able to do that and make the father and daughter have stunts that work differently from everybody else's in the game and the same as each other. So I was really happy with that bit of theming.
Fantastic. So anything else you want to add to this before we get to the 5 questions you have to answer before you can leave?
Oh my God.
It feels like we've been talking 5 minutes, but it's unfortunately longer than that.
Yeah, no, no, I don't think I've got anything particular I need to add to that. I hope anybody who hasn't had a chance to check out the Dresden-Files Kickstarter will go give it a look-see. I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, and they should. We're going to follow up your interview with the review of the game with some time left in the campaign so people can get a chance to go check it out. So let's get you the 5 questions you have to answer before you can hang up the Skype with me.
Okay.
Question number 1, would you rather play a game that you love with people you absolutely despise or a game you hate with people that you love to hang out with?
Number 2, for sure. I have sometimes thought I want to create a board game about game night in which you gain points for playing the game you want to play, and then you lose points for who you have to play it with. And
it's called the game of life, Eric.
It'll be like slow player joins your game, lose a turn, that kind of.
It's so true, isn't it? It's so true.
Yeah, I'm kind of famous for having a reputation for being very picky about who I play with and ruthlessly getting rid of people I can't stand.
You crush dreams left and right.
I do. Just a dick.
That's all right. Just own it. What's the best game that you've played this year that you didn't design?
That's new to me this year. Right? It's just published this year.
Yeah, sure. Let's go with that. You can go with whatever you want. We'll go with that.
Let me see. I am probably not quite. It's not quite this year. Now that we're in 2016, I guess. I was gonna say Roll for the Galaxy. It's certainly been a fabulous game that's been hitting the table all the time for me lately. Maybe The Game. That's probably my new favorite cooperative. I think now that I'm liking cooperatives better, really enjoying The Game.
All right.
Irritatingly named The Game.
Incredibly irritatingly named, but
it's so much fun.
But good nonetheless, and people seem to really like it. I haven't played it, and I kind of feel bad about that.
Oh, you got to give it a try.
I know.
It's really a hoot.
I think it'll be one that my mom will like, so I think we'll take it to New Jersey with us this summer.
That's good.
Yeah. Any one game experience in particular that sticks out to you, good or bad, in your enormous history of being a gamer? Besides the times that you crush people's dreams?
Okay, so it's maybe not directly related to the game we were playing itself, but And there is this gamer I know. We were gaming in what was then our kind of